Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your Fulham podcast from Down Under. Here again. Today we are discussing a sloppy Sunday session as Fulham go down to Liverpool at Craven Cottage in a 3-1 loss. Here to talk it all through, dissect it, try and work out what happened. We have Skibby. How are we going, mate?
Hello, gents. Yeah, I'm as good as you can be after a certain Sunday, but luckily it was right at the end of the weekend, so it's not completely ruining the weekend. But no, happy to be here, happy to vent, and happy to get it off my chest. So happy to unload and get rid of all the bad Fulham feelings that I currently hold within.
I feel like we're having a few too many of these sessions this season. It feels like every other week it's a vent and a chance to regroup and here also to talk it all through. Dad, how are we going tonight?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Good to be back. And yeah, like you say, it's time for that session where we clear it all out, and let's just get into it.
Just call it a big group hug, I think. That's the only way to say. So, guys, a 3-1 loss. Look, we were very positive going into this one, looking at opportunities that we had. Liverpool coming off the back of a pretty tough fixture list. We saw the team that they put out as well and thought this is a real opportunity to take them on and maybe get something out of the game. But it just wasn't to be on the day. And there's multiple reasons for that. And I think we'll dive into a lot of those. Skibby, before the game, it all felt very positive, but it seemed to go wrong. Would you say right from the start?
I wouldn't say it was from the start. I think it was an opportunity when we saw the Liverpool lineup. Like, I think I've mentioned a few times that Soboslai was rested, Salah was rested, McAllister rested, a lot of players missing. And I think they had a midfield of Endo, Harvey Elliott, cue the booze, and then who was the other midfielder they had? Gravenberch. Oh yeah, literally staring me in the face as it so he scored. But no, on paper, that midfield to me seemed like an opportunity that we could actually kind of dictate the midfield a little bit. Like it was a bit of a misshapen Liverpool midfield. I don't think they've ever really played together as a three that I remember. So I thought, Lukic, Pereira, and an on-form Palhinha would be really on form to really dictate the midfield. And that just didn't happen. And you know what? Hands up. I'll say to Endo, he had a very good game. I actually thought he was quite good, to be honest. I've written him off before the game. But I think from the get-go, we didn't really see the same Liverpool that we've seen 3 times this year, which was this really hard press, really rushed Fulham on the ball. And, many times in the previous games, we did really well to sort of get out of tricky situations just because of the relentless Liverpool pressure and when we had the ball. And I didn't see the same kind of intensity from Liverpool, potentially because of the many games they had coming into this. But the lackluster from Liverpool potentially allowed Fulham to have a bit of a sleepier start to the game. I feel like we could have been in their face a lot more, could have really taken the game to them. And I think that didn't happen. For me, Willian was a big miss on the left-hand side. He makes things happen, gets on the ball, looks for players, and just looks to create something out of nothing. And unfortunately, as much as I love Bobby and he does what he does, but he's just not the same kind of player coming in. But I do think it was a bit of a sluggish start. I don't think we were really under the cosh from Liverpool for that first half.
No.
I thought it was very even and balanced, and hence why it was 1-1 at half time.
It's an interesting point you make as well about Liverpool. The other 3 times we played them this season, they do press very hard. And I actually think Fulham have done quite well to play through that press. And it actually creates opportunities for us when we do play through that press. And maybe the Liverpool tactic here was to stand off us a little bit and make us try and create something, which is something we've struggled with quite a lot this season, creating chances out of nothing. We often find that we are putting sort of aimless balls into the box, passing the ball around the midfield, constantly having to go back because we're not finding an avenue of attack. And maybe Liverpool actually outthunk us here. Outthunk sounds better. Outthunk us here. And genuinely sat off us and let us, forced us to actually make something happen, which we struggle with. And I found Fulham, we seemed to be quite happy to let Liverpool hold the ball quite early on. For the first 15 minutes, I remember talking to Dad and saying, if we can get through this first 15 minutes, it feels like there might be something in the game for us here, because Liverpool had a lot of possession. I think they had almost 90% possession after the first 10 minutes. But we looked quite comfortable as well at the same time. Dad, your thoughts on that opening sort of half of the first half, where both teams seemed fairly evenly matched?
I thought we started looking comfortable at about 15 minutes. Before that, I thought we were a bit ragged. And we were definitely feeling each other out. They look so much better on the ball than us. I agree with Skibby that Williams' absence was a big loss. We all kind of sucked in a bit of air when we saw that. I don't think Bobby had a bad game, but as you say, Skibby, it just doesn't compare.
No.
Yeah, doesn't compare. And I think it was kind of inconclusive. I was kind of relieved in that first 15 or 20 that we didn't go down one, because it could easily have happened out of a moment of brilliance. When we got to about 15 minutes, I was a lot more comfortable, because it seemed that we'd found our feet and we were just stringing a few passes together and just looking like, when we did have the ball, we didn't look like we were dangerous, but we looked like we were suddenly back or perhaps in the game for the first time. Yeah, look, credit to Liverpool. Even when you take 3 or 4 players out of their side, they're a very, very good football team. You can't get away from that. And I think we've been spoiled by having put in some really good performances over the last 2 years, actually. And I remember going back to our first year back in the Premier League, that first game we played Liverpool. It was a revelation of just how well we did against them. And it was largely intensity and just desire. I don't think we probably weren't even as good a side as we are today, but we were very, very hard work for them. And just that sort of terrier mentality causes the best of teams problems. And I think we did lack that yesterday. Maybe we were trying to be a bit clever. And as you guys say, maybe, I think Jack mentioned, maybe there was a plan to not press them and not harry them. But they kind of did the same to us. And we probably didn't react very well. So that talking about that first 15 minutes was a bit difficult to work out what was really, really going on. You could see the net effect of it, but why it was happening was not clear. But it didn't feel like we were going to cause them problems initially. That was kind of somewhat deflating. I wasn't frustrated. It's just a bit deflating, because I just thought, doesn't feel like it's going to be our day.
Yeah, and look, it wasn't. I think we talked a little bit about, Skibby, you mentioned at the start that it looked possibly like our midfield could potentially dominate Liverpool's sort of thrown together midfield, despite the fact that those thrown together players are top quality players. But it just felt like Andreas Pereira, I thought, had a very good game. Lukic and Polina, though, I think had poor games. And look, Polina had some good moments throughout the game, but he wasn't at that level that we sort of expect from Polina. More so, Lukic was a passenger for the first half. I barely remember seeing him. And I think potentially Polina was having to pick up a fair bit of slack there as well. And it led to the first goal. We'll jump back about 3 minutes before that, where Polina sides down. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Diaz Jota with a terrible tackle. And Harvey Elliott steps up to take probably the worst free kick ever taken at Craven Cottage, trying to slip it under the wall. It probably wouldn't have even made the goal line, which was a highlight of the game for me. But not long after, Polina, again, same stupid tackle from behind, gets nowhere near the ball, gives Liverpool another opportunity. And when they've got someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold in their team, you cannot give them opportunities like that. Same as when you play West Ham, you can't let Ward-Prowse have a free kick in that kind of area. It's surely something that you talk about. Don't foul around the box because they're very good there. And Trent puts away a very good free kick. Leno can't really do much about that, to be honest. It's pretty much top corner going away from him. But again, it just feels sloppy. They're silly tackles to be giving away at the edge of the box, especially slide tackles. It's not like you've been done by a tricky piece of footwork. Skibby, in the ground, did it feel a similar sort of sentiment that Palhinha was just a little bit off?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think with the first foul that you mentioned, with the worst free kick we'd ever seen, for me, I was thinking, yeah, Trent's going to bury this top corner. And then Harvey Elliott stepped up.
Yeah.
Did awfully. But, and then, then we saw a free kick a little bit further left. And you're like, well, here we go. And then, it was kind of like warning signs. Like, we just don't want to be doing that. And yeah, Palhinha for me was off the pace, I think. But it's an interesting point that you make, because I completely agree that I think when Lukic and Palhinha play together, Palhinha is overburdened. And I know people are going to say they've played together, they've done really well, but I can think of, I think Fulham v Spurs, Lukic started to get with Palhinha and had a really good game. Fine. Hold my hands up for that. But every other game Palhinha started with Lukic, that Lukic has just gone missing and doesn't do anything and gets subbed and more or less has no impact on the game. Then when Palhinha is banned and Lukic starts with Reed, that's when he had his best spell at Fulham. So it's really interesting that I think I've sort of mentioned this on Twitter, like to try and get some answers from people. Just what is happening with Lukic when he plays with Palhinha? Why can they not work together? Because on paper, they're not the same midfielder. You've got Lukic, who is apparently quite a good on the ball, bit of a disruptor, but not so much a warrior as Palhinha, but can sort of find a pass. And whereas Palhinha is just complete nutcase that will bully people. But they should complement each other on paper, but they just don't seem to on the pitch. And I think against Spurs, we may have just got really lucky where Postecoglou just got it completely wrong, that it complemented Palhinha and Lukic. But I know people keep saying to give Lukic time, but I don't know how much more time I can give him, because he just doesn't offer anything. And we can't have someone in our squad who gives one good game every, 10 or 15 games, or whenever Palhinha is not there, because Palhinha is going to be the first name on the team sheet in the midfield, let's be honest. So if they're not playing together, so why? I just can't give him any more time, personally.
I think you're onto something, Skibby. I really do. I think it kind of feels like a lack of adaptability. There is definitely a player there. Clearly, look how good he was against Spurs, and we've seen moments. But it's either a chemistry problem. It's not a skills problem on paper at all. It just isn't. But it's a chemistry problem, or it's just a. There was a moment yesterday, possibly unrelated, but maybe I'm looking for it now. There was a moment where we were lining up to defend a corner, and it was kind of a shot on the guys at the front sort of zone or marking that the edge of the box. And
I'll stop you there. It was actually when we were attacking a corner. It was the one time we had a corner in the game.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry.
And
I just remember
I know the exact point you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't actually matter whether we're attacking or defending. The point that I remembered was he looked like he didn't actually know what the game plan was, which cannot be true. They must rehearse this and drill this over and over. But it just felt like his head was out of the game. I may be looking into it too much, because I did find that he was missing from more than just parts of the game. He'd drift in and do a few things, and kind of, he looks awkward when he roughs people up. I've seen him do it, and he did it to Maddison really effectively. And it looks very, it almost looks contrived, like he's been told, you will do this, and then he goes and does it very explicitly, as opposed to that being a natural part of his game. I think I I think I'm with you guys. It's difficult to put your finger on it, but we are struggling to find a place for him and a consistent role for him. And it may just be that he doesn't complement the other players around him and the other options we have. It's difficult to find a pairing that is our best 11. We can't be leading with Harrison Reed. Nothing against Harrison Reed, but Pelini, as you said, first name on the team sheet. So everyone else has to complement with him.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it's really hard for the centre midfielder anyway, because it's just a position where you can't go missing. You're so heavily relied on. You are the core to the game in that midfield.
Of course.
And for for Lukic to be, I think the term that my dad used next to me was swanning around, is just something you can't do in the Premier League, let alone against Liverpool. You just can't just go missing. You needed to step up, and I just can't. I just don't see it. I try to. I really want to like him. I really do, but I just can't see it.
He reminds me a little bit, and in a slightly different way, of someone like Bobby Decordova-Reid, in that sometimes Bobby has a blinding game and is probably a man of the match, maybe pops up with a goal, does a few incredible things throughout the game. And other times he, again, is a bit of a passenger, or just every time he touches the ball, it's not quite coming off. And I think Lukic is basically our central midfielder version of Decordova-Reid, in that Bobby covers the wings and plays that role. Lukic is currently covering the centre and playing that role of sometimes he's great, sometimes he's a ghost. And look, he's probably a step up from, probably a step up from Harrison Reed. Definitely a step up from blokes like Josh Onoma and Chalobah, who were floating around before. So it's not the worst player to have in your squad. I can't imagine we're going to be moving him on anytime soon. I think there's, in a similar fashion to Muniz, there's something there. It's just about how you unlock it, because we've seen him put in good performances. He's a skillful player. He's done it in another league, in Serie A. Similar to sort of Calvin Bassey, when you come across from another league. He was at Rangers doing incredibly well, goes to Ajax and just can't get it working, comes to Fulham, and all of a sudden it comes back again. Maybe it's just about Marco having another pre-season with him and unlocking whatever is inside him that actually turns him into a player who will be able to play for us for the long term. And look, Polina, let's be honest, this summer he's probably gone. So with Polina gone, Lukic doesn't actually have to play alongside him anymore. And maybe then there's a little bit more flexibility to what Lukic actually gives to the team and his role within the team, and maybe something changes. But against Liverpool, like you said, Skibby, you need to step up. You need to play at your absolute best. You need, and you saw it from some other players out there. Pereira was putting in a shift. He was running hard. He was pressing. He was shouting at his teammates, saying, get across there, press, move here, pass the ball here. Really, really showing up and looking like someone who you sort of understand why he's been picked for Brazil at that point, because he looked like a Brazilian player. But Lukic, complete opposite, just looked completely out of place. And Dad, like you said, from that corner, he looked lost, and he looked like he didn't know what he was meant to be doing out there, which cannot be the case. Surely can't be the case. Go on, Skibby.
One thing I was going to say was, from my view, how Liverpool set up, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. It was very unorthodox, and it was really interesting to see, because I don't know whether it was visible on TV, but when Liverpool were in possession, Quansah and Trent almost switched. And Quansah was like the right back. Trent became this sort of marauding centre back who went into sort of a central defensive midfield and was sort of looking to sort of ping passes, which pushed Harvey Elliott out wide right. And then I think potentially for Lukic, that was probably a bit confusing and a bit hard to get your head around, because, you're expecting Trent just to sort of stay on the right, ping balls in, crosses and all that stuff. And, he's probably going to follow Harvey Elliott. But, when you're always having to chop and change and hand over players, it can get really tiring, not just physically, but mentally. And I think it was just really interesting watching that dynamic and just seeing how much time and space Trent would have in that sort of central midfield. every time he was sort of pushed from sort of Van Dijk and Quansah just sort of pushing out wide, Trent would sit in the middle and then come forward, and Lukic would just kind of not be where he was supposed to be as a standard central midfielder. But yeah, I'm not saying it's all completely down to him, but it was just maybe an argument to why he was potentially confused and not knowing what to do. But yeah, it was just a bit of a tough day in the office, I suppose.
But credit to Liverpool, they're absolutely elite, and their tactics and their plans are very clever, and you'd expect that from them. And they've got, that level. You actually have to have very smart players who can actually hold all of those patterns in their head and adapt to them, and actually listen to a couple of screams from the line to actually reorganize things, and they get it really quickly. And I don't know if I'm being too harsh, but it strikes me as Lukic isn't that adaptable, and he's not that. I just don't think he's good enough, actually. I mean,
yeah,
a bit harsh. I'm not talking about skill. We're not talking about skills here. We're talking about that all-round capability to compete at the really, really highest level when teams are pulling really complex shit, and it's changing all the time. And it's not textbook stuff. You've got to be adaptable, and you've got to see it and pick it and go, I know exactly what they're doing there, just as you described it, Skibby.
It's like football intelligence, isn't it? There's one thing about having the skill, but it just comes down to your football IQ. Not every player has it, and I think you see top players get moved on by sort of the top managers because they can't have that football IQ. You look at sort of Pep Guardiola, ruthless player manager. If he has a player at his disposal, like you look at sort of like João Cancelo. If you don't do, you may be one of the best fullbacks in the world, but if you can't do what he wants you to do because he's so absolutely top technically minded, then you're off, and he'll find someone who can do it. And I think from a much lower perspective for us, we're asking certain things from certain players, but if you can't do it, then you're not Marco's man, and he'll find someone who is.
And Marco, as we're discovering week in, week out, is a very technically minded manager. and all power to him, because that's how you take a very modest squad and turn them into giant killers by having that. So you've got to have players with high IQ. And just as an aside, I know we're jumping around, but it's a very interesting conversation. Do you know who I reckon is actually a very high IQ player? And I think that's what we're seeing coming through. Muniz.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think we've mentioned it a few times that Muniz, his ability to consistently get in the right areas and also consistently pick the right pass as well. You can see it. And look, I think there was, and maybe it's a one-off, but there were multiple times where our footballing IQ, if you will, was off on the weekend. And maybe that's just down to having a bad game, but there were lots of times, and that's why I titled the podcast as sloppy, because there were lots of sloppy instances, and unfortunately against a team like Liverpool you get punished for them. Let's talk about the Fulham goal though. Now just before the goal was scored, you were actually quite close to it where you sit, Skibby. Looked a penalty to me for a push on Muniz. Robertson comes through the back of Muniz basically and just gives him a shove without even attempting to play the ball. Fortunately, not long after that, Fulham do manage to find the net. It's again really good work from Muniz, who has a shot on goal, gets up very quickly, gets another header on goal, and the ball falls to Timmy Chestnut, so he puts the ball into the back of the net for his first Fulham goal. Skibby, I'll throw to you. Just talk us through the goal, because you were obviously very close to it as well.
Yeah, I think the incident that you talk about was probably the highlight that I remember, is just seeing Muniz get absolutely flattened as the ball comes in. And I think you have to commend Muniz here, because I think as much as I love Pereira, he probably wouldn't have been as switched on as Muniz was. I think he would be straight into the ref's face saying that was a foul, this was that, you got to check that. But for Muniz to be fouled, and let's be honest, if it went to VAR, we wouldn't have got it anyway. But
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
another story. But I mean, for Muniz to get up, still keep battling, have Robertson's number, and I think he tries to head towards goal, bounces off him, and bounces very kindly for Castagna to put into the back of the net. But I think that was, for me, was a great way to end the half. And it was just a really showing this Muniz for that entire half. He was battling hard. He was, I think we were talking about the football IQ. We were sort of seeing Muniz, who wasn't, he was sitting on, I think Van Dijk was actually trying to hold Muniz quite a lot. They wouldn't let him go and sit on Kwanzaa for that reason. And the times that he did sit on Kwanzaa, he was having a bit of success, able to chest it down. And I think even before that, I think there was an element where ball would come in. I think Iwobi cut it back. Muniz took a touch, took himself really wide. And I think it got saved, or I think it missed the target just off the near post. But there was chances for Muniz. He was getting in and about, and I think that was something which we just weren't continuing later on in the game. But for the goal, it was just very much rinse and repeat. We were working the wide areas. We were getting beyond Robertson. A lot of luck that we were having was coming down the right-hand side for Fulham. I know a lot of people, potentially second half, Iwobi wasn't the best, but I thought first half, Iwobi was carrying the ball really well, trying to find Muniz and trying to find Pereira. And that was where we were having a lot of success. And I think going in for that goal and 1-1 at half time was a fair result. But we were seeing a Fulham team that was growing into the half. Half time probably came at the wrong time, but you wanted us to sort of continue that effect, but it just didn't seem to happen. But it was really refreshing to see just that kind of solo battling from Muniz, which led to a goal. And for me, that is, I know he hasn't been credited the assist, but for me, that is an assist for Muniz because it was just fantastic centre forward play and just kept fighting for that ball, and Fulham got the rewards from it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's unfortunate he doesn't get credited with the assist, but that goal is down to a lot of his hard work and getting in good positions. And like you said, it's not so much football IQ, but more just the attitude that he has when he's playing, where he could have easily stayed down and chucked a hissy fit because he did get fouled, and VAR would have looked at it, and like you said, guarantee we wouldn't have got a penalty. But it's good of him. He gets straight back up, straight back into the game, and gets straight into the action as well. And it's almost like, right, well, a slight against me. You haven't given me the foul. I'm going to do something about it and almost prove you wrong, and make something happen. And he did. And look, it's a really good finish from Castagna. Takes a little bit of a deflection, I think, or maybe the keeper, Allison, just sort of slightly puts his leg out. It comes off his leg, and Endo on the line sort of gets wrong-footed slightly and goes into the back of the net. But like you said, great way to end the half. 1-1. I think it was kind of fairly well deserved at that point as well. 1-1. It didn't feel like we sort of sniped the game here. It did feel when they scored the first one that maybe this could get away from us, but it just didn't. 1-1 at halftime, feeling fairly positive that we can maybe hold on, and at least you know that you can score a goal, and we were creating some chances. But second half felt like a bit of a different story. The Gravenberch goal obviously kind of kills the game off. Skibby, I'll throw to you first on the Gravenberch goal. It's a good finish, hits it into the side netting, but it's sloppy from Fulham.
Yeah, I think this is where we got caught out from a crossball pass from Iwobi, which was just nowhere near anyone. And I think it was something that we tried a lot in the first half, and we just kept giving the ball away. And I'm not sure whether there was a swirling wind that no one knew about, just happened to be, as soon as it started to sort of clear the stand, it just seemed to stop dead. But yeah, I think Iwobi was guilty of it. I think Pereira was guilty. I think Tosin and Bassi also got guilty of these sort of crossfield balls that just didn't reach their man. And unfortunately, it was one too many. And when you do that against a team like Liverpool, I mean, yeah, Gravenberch, probably not the most notorious goal scorer for Liverpool, but you do that against the top sides and they're going to punish you. And unfortunately, Iwobi was caught short. And yeah, before we knew it, it was kind of like a sort of a 3-on-3 situation. Gravenberch had a lot of time on the edge of the box and just picked his spot. Nothing Leno could do for it about it for me. It was just one of those give the ball away, get punished, and unfortunately that's just how it ended.
Dad, I know you get frustrated by Fulham's passing from sitting next to you and hearing the constantly in the oohs and ahs. Fulham were off against Liverpool multiple times, but that ball from Iwobi sort of spoke volumes for me about the way we were playing the game. He's gone for a big crossfield, which was never really on. A lot of misplaced passes. Do you think maybe we were almost trying too hard to play that wonder ball, like the highlight ball, rather than just playing simple?
Maybe, but I don't think so. I don't think anything random happens in Marco's world. I suspect that it may well have been a tactic. You've got to find creative ways to beat and overcome sides like Liverpool, and it's possible they were trying something a little different to just switch play, and it just wasn't really coming off. I'm not going to let Tosin out with the same excuse, because
we'll get to Tosin, don't worry.
I see it too often, so I'm not. Yeah, I know, but I'm not letting him off. When Iwobi's passing is generally not too bad. He's not great at the killer balls into the box or having a shot on goal from time to time, but and guys like Bassi, I wouldn't normally credit him with wild passing. He does have the odd brain fade from time to time, but he's actually pretty good with his feet. With his left foot, he's very reliable, and so it feels.
In saying that, the sloppiness. Remember that ball Bassi played across to Tosin and just underhit it and misdirected it. It was all over the park. We just were not making anything stick.
But don't forget, the problem with playing very good teams who are building up pressure on you, scoreboard pressure, if nothing else, as the game progresses and the time clock's running down. As good as you are, or good as you think you are, it creates pressure. And so even as calm and composed as we normally look playing out of the back, it causes problems. And I think that's a component as well. Has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think that goal and I guess the manner of it as well felt like you saw a few players' heads drop. And then as we sort of approached the 60th minute, and I don't know what it was like in the ground, Skivvy, but it was definitely like it in our WhatsApp. And the sentiment was, where are the subs? 60th minute, surely some subs, nothing. 65th minute, surely some subs, nothing. I think the first sub came in about the 72nd or 73rd minute of the game. Just far too late. And look, it's something we have talked about a lot with Marco. And yes, he did sub players off after 30 minutes in a game this season. But do you feel like we could have potentially made some subs earlier? And on top of that, do you feel like it would have made a massive difference considering we brought on Kearney for Polina and Wilson for who did Wilson come on for? BDR.
BDR, yeah. I mean, it was the wrong subs for me. I was crying out. I think I've even said it into the chat at the time, which, Iwobi for me, everyone was slating how bad of a game he had. I honestly didn't think he was that bad, but it was obviously just the passing for the second goal that obviously is kind of, I think, just kind of decorated him into a certain light, which is saying, he had a bad game. But for me, I was crying out for Kearney, for Lukic. I think even before the second goal went in, I think we just needed someone who could be calm on the ball, bring it forward and make things happen. And for me, I wanted to see Adama come on. I think we keep giving Adama 5 minutes, and that's just not enough time for someone like him, especially when we talked about the fullbacks of Liverpool. So Robertson is, really high. Trent was somehow pushed into the middle and become a centre back or whatever. So why not throw Adama on? Get him to hug that touchline on that left-hand side. Give Quansah something to think about. I mean, he's not the most experienced of defenders. And I didn't think, for me, it should have been Adama on for Iwobi, because I just don't think he would have, give him, like I said, give him something to think about. Get Adama attacking Quansah, see what he's about, and then that gives Liverpool something to think about. Of, okay, we can't bring Trent over and make him that free man in the midfield anymore. We've now got to get him to watch Adama Traore. But yeah, it was just the wrong subs, the wrong time. Again, you said Pereira had a fantastic game. I thought he was one of our best players. Take him off for Kearney. It's not a real like for like for me. It just didn't sit right. We were asking for subs before then because it was very obvious that the game was slipping away around the 50th minute mark. And it was just frustrating that in this game alone, it felt like we needed something to go catastrophically wrong for us to then start having a knee-jerk reaction to make changes, rather than, things aren't really going our way. It's going to happen.
Absolutely
it's coming. And we had to wait for it to actually happen to make a decision, which is unfortunate. But hey, it is what it is.
Yeah,
sadly, I feel it's become a thing that we tend to make substitutions reactively. I think that's the best way to actually describe it. You're right, Skibby. I actually think in a game against Liverpool, okay, we got that goal just before half time. It would have been really brave to make a change at half time and to go, hang on, I've thought about this. I don't care so much about the scoreline. I'm looking at what's really happening in the game, and we've got to change something. And the right thing to do in my head would have been to take Lukic off. As the game progressed, we take Polini off because he's losing his head, and he's likely to get sent off. And there's so many things going on here. There, as you say, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, where the pressure just builds on Polini, and there's so much on his shoulders. He's trying to do so much, and if he's not getting support from another defensive midfielder, it just gets worse for him, and it actually brings out the worst in Polini. If he's got great support, he seems to sort of back off a bit more. We get the best out of him. It would have been a great, brave move, I think, to bring Kearney on at halftime. I thought Wilson was disappointing again. He was completely ineffectual for me when he came on. Adama, way too late. And I feel for the guy because not only did he come on too late for the kind of player I think he is, I don't remember one ball played in behind in space to let him run onto it. Not one.
No, it just feels like something that we should be doing every time. There are a couple of times I thought Leno gets the ball in hand, just thump it into a corner and let him chase and see what he can do, because he should out muscle and outpace anyone he comes up against.
So obvious. I mean, you can say he's one dimensional, but it's a hell of a dimension, and we have to be extracting that. But I think to also to your point, Skippy, I just don't think he's that fast a starter. It takes time to get into the game, and I think it's a disservice. We're just not using him properly to give him such a short amount of time. Like, what's he going to do in 5 minutes? What's he going to do?
If you put him on the left wing against Trent, who I think he has probably one of the worst defensive stats for a right back in the league. I mean, he scores free kicks and he gets assists, but defensively, he's actually terrible. So to bring on someone like Traore with 20 minutes left against someone like Alexander-Arnold, you probably would have seen some results personally. But yeah, again, it just didn't seem to. Obviously, Marco sees something that we don't. I don't know what he sees, but
it is about it's about how you approach it as well. And he's not. Maybe for Marco, it feels like he would regard something like that as just too reckless. he wants to be very systematic. Another way of looking at that might be, he has huge trust in his selection and he wants to give them and back them, but I think he just backs them too long. And I think, and maybe it's also a function of not having enough quality on the bench. If you've got incredible quality on the bench, maybe it changes your outlook about how early you're prepared to start subbing people off.
And there's an element of trust, isn't there? If you can get into halftime, you know what you want to change. You speak to the player in question and you give them 10 minutes to change it. I guess that's why we didn't see the immediate changes. But I think sometimes there's probably elements of trust which are just too strong, I think is the word. Whereas we've seen Marco make the changes in first half after 30 minutes against Forest. I like that relentless Marco. I think we should. I think we should encourage that a lot more in terms of we're seeing something go wrong. We can't wait to have a chat and fix it, or for the player to have the individual time to fix it. Therefore, we got to make these subs now, and that's just something that I haven't seen in the last few games since Forest.
It just seems kind of, it's maybe I'm making it sound more basic than it is, but our bench at the moment is actually kind of okay. Like you can bring on Tom Kearney, Adama, Jimenez, Broja, Wilson, Reed in sort of, let's call it attacking positions, anything from the midfield forwards. What I don't understand, you have 5 substitutions you're allowed to make during a game. We only made 3, and the third one came with 5 minutes left in the game when it's far too late. You're already 3-1 down. It's not a massive risk to make 3 substitutions in the 65th minute or 60th minute. You can leave one left over right for the very end just in case you get an injury to back yourself up. But you can make those 3 changes and go, right, it's obvious what's not working. Let's just completely throw it all out, start again almost, and throw everything at this team because we're already down anyway. What have we got to lose? It didn't add up, and I didn't like the subs. When I think we were all messaging and we pretty much all said the exact same things, saying we should be seeing Adama come on, and he didn't. And I would never have taken Polina off. The only thing I can think of is maybe we want to make sure he doesn't get sent off in this game and miss the games against Palace and Brentford, or pick up. I mean, he'd already picked up a yellow, so it doesn't really matter at that point. But baffling. And it's not the first time this season we've said that. The third goal from Jota, 72nd minute. Balls played through to him, very tight offside. I would have liked to have looked at it a few more times. They seemed to briefly look at it. I think it seemed like you could draw a few more lines on that and potentially come up with a completely different result. But at the end of the day, this actually comes down to the fact that it's again Tosin putting in a lackluster challenge, getting dispossessed, and leading to a goal. And look, Dad, I'll throw to you because I know you're ready to go. Tosin had a very off day.
Well, first, before we talk about that, I mean, I don't recall, correct me if I'm wrong, the first thing that a contentious VAR offside decision normally gets is the lines on the pitch, right? I don't remember.
They don't always show them on the TV footage.
Well, because they definitely didn't. And I thought that was incredibly close. We were trying to work it out as we were watching it. And obviously you can't because the resolution isn't good enough. But I think if you're going to show 3 players in a constellation and that there are a bunch of people in a room trying to work out whether they're offside, it would be good to actually give a bit more data. If you're going to go that far, let's have a look at it. I'm not suggesting that they looked at it and decided, nah. And the commentator actually said he's been given the benefit of the doubt in the offside decision. I mean, where's that a rule?
Yeah,
it's empirical data.
I hope that was a slip of the tongue, but let's be honest, it's not.
Yeah.
It's a rule that came with, human interference, human reffing, basically.
Yeah,
the
that's
attackers
fine.
always got benefit of the doubt. But yeah, the problem they've got is they haven't changed the rule when technologies come in. That's where they've messed up hugely.
Or maybe it's just a slip of the mind for what is really going on in people's
Well,
heads.
yeah.
And that's one of the things. I mean, we've got to the 72nd minute in the game, and what we haven't talked about is the officiating on the day, or the reffing, which
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't the reason that Fulham got beaten 3-1, but I thought he was shit. I actually thought he was really average, letting a lot of things go both ways. Just that was it the first goal that there was actually a contentious free kick.
Yeah, there was a foul on Iwobi.
Iwobi.
Gets
Mhm.
clipped on the side, on the byline, and that sort of leads to the free kick being given. And yeah, I agree. He was
It leads to
poor
a rash
throughout.
challenge, right?
There was
Yeah,
Kenny got taken down on the edge of the box.
yeah.
I think it was still could have been 3-1 by that point, but it should have been given as a free kick. There were a lot of times when the Fulham players were quite pissed off, and you saw it with Castagna getting a yellow card for call it
Sent.
lively debating with the referee. Um,
Mm.
and look, I think the VAR thing, it's interesting. I saw an interesting tweet from John Ormonroyd on Twitter. I'll read it out because I've pulled it up. A player running at 15 miles per hour moves more than 13 centimeters between single frames of a 50 frames per second video feed. Every degree of misalignment of a cross pitch line equates to a meter of error at the far touchline. So how can you give a player offside by a big toe when, and you look at it when the ball is sort of attached to, I think it's Gravenberch who plays a through ball. It could be Gakpo. The freeze frame that they take is the ball attached to his foot, but it's quite possible that it's actually needs to be another couple of milli frames, and he is offside all of a sudden by a big toe. So it's fine margins, but it's I still personally I still like VAR. I just don't like the people who actually who use it. I think they're underqualified. They're um, inexperienced, and when I say that, I don't mean inexperienced as referees. I mean inexperienced as people who have a good understanding of football and understand when a player is standing in front of the goalkeeper, that goalkeeper is being obstructed, and therefore it should not be given as a goal if they're standing in offside position. Simple stuff, but again, we could talk about VAR over and over again every single season. I don't want to do that because it's boring and it's shit.
Controversially, I would hate to see that Jota goal ruled out for offside as a football fan. I mean, we saw it with Coventry and Coventry FA Cup. Like, I mean, offside for me is, an attacker trying to make a blatant, advantage over the defender. And I mean, did Jota really get an advantage over the Bassi there? No. And I mean, the same thing with Coventry. And I think, yes, it's just a shit rule with technology now making it even worse. But I think if we're seeing that being ruled out and ruining, we want to see goals. And I mean, taking my Fulham, I might literally do it, but taking my Fulham hat off and putting my football fan hat on, I don't want to see goals ruled out because of the big toe and all that crap. I want to see goals. I want to see action. And I want to see Man United lose in a FA Cup semi-final when they're 3-0 up. But not to be.
Yeah, you almost want to see. You almost want to see the return of the old daylight rule with offside, where there has to be daylight in between the two players. And then that's pretty easy to look at, and you can use VAR for that as well, quite happily, because it's obvious when there's daylight between two players.
If there's daylight, cheated. End of.
Yeah, but here when you're saying, okay, well, which part of the body can you score from? And I remember there was one where I think it was Tosin was stepping up, but had his legs spread so wide that his foot was playing the guy. His whole body was playing him offside, but his foot was just left behind, playing him onside, and that gets given as a goal. And there is daylight between the two bodies because Tosin's body is completely moved. He just hasn't pulled his foot with him. it needs a review, and I think we're probably getting to the stage. I saw already that the Premier League's going to be using semi-automated offsides next season,
Yeah.
so it'd be interesting to see how that goes down. I guess at that point, it just gets flagged straight away and doesn't get double checked. It's automated, so that maybe that does solve the problem a little bit.
Well, it doesn't take into account what John Ormonroyd is referring to.
Sure.
And maybe, and it probably will get there. It's why not? You know, if every boot had a chip and every ball had a chip, you'd know the moment that the ball left the boot, and so you could track it. And you know, maybe we do get to the point where it doesn't matter if it's a toe, but that's the rule, and it's fair, and it can be done instantly, and I'm okay with that. But anyway, back to your original question, Jack.
Yeah. What was it?
You want to talk about? Yeah, it was about Tosin.
Oh, yeah.
You're trying to
Going on Tosin.
you're trying
Now's
to
your chance.
bait me about Tosin. Look, you'd probably argue that in and amongst some of the clumsy stuff yesterday, he didn't totally stand out. He was annoying me because he continued to play some what I call pretty high risk passes. I know it's part of how we play out, but you know, there's that situation where you could be screaming at the guys in the midfield for not giving you anything, but if they're not giving you anything, you hoof it. You know, you don't play a shit pass to a guy in a bad position and then blaming him for being in a bad position, or play a really tight high risk pass. So I just get frustrated when he continues to try to do that. And yeah, there was a bit of that yesterday, but he was not alone.
I mean,
was that it?
Tackle. Yeah, I was going to say, I was waiting for a little bit more.
I'm conscious of my
You're gonna have a little 5-minute
that
lay
precedes
down.
me. Yeah, no.
Well, for that
okay,
third
we're
goal,
going on.
was it
Yeah.
Gravenberch, I think, who was sort of breaking through? And I'm sorry, but as a centre back, call me old fashioned, but you clear the ball, clear the man, get rid of it. And he just let it bounce off his leg and bounce through. I was like, it was such a soft tackle for a centre back in the Premier League that, you know, like, you know, I think Bassey would have just cleared him out, taken control of the situation and just, you know, done anything other than what Tosin did. But yeah, that just kind of was pinnacle for me of just his head's not there. He just doesn't care. And it's just,
he's done.
It's almost done. And then I'm actually going to call out Leno a little bit. It wasn't a great effort for a save. You know, I mean, Bassey did well to sort of keep up with Jota, push him wide, and then, you know, he's only going to go across the goalkeeper. So Leno should already be, you know, on his toes, thinking he's going to go across the keeper. And he kind of gets a hand to it and it spins it. It wasn't a good look for Leno. I mean, if it was a 2-1 win for Liverpool and that was the winner, there would be a lot more disgruntlement towards Leno, I think, especially on socials and everything. But I think because it was 3-1, Fulham looked pretty much down and out by that point anyway. He kind of got off a little bit scot-free, I think, but not the greatest effort from Leno on that third goal.
100% agree. And he did actually make a couple of decent saves throughout the game. So, yeah, I mean, he's been far less consistent than he was last season, I found. Last season, he saves that quite comfortably. You know, the fact this goal goes down the middle of the goal, it goes in across the dead center of the goal line, and he's got a hand to it, and it's gone through him. It's a bit disappointing. You kind of expect more from your keeper than that, but again, not going to hold it against him for everything he's done over the last 2 years at Fulham. But it does feel like you said, if that was the winning goal and we lost 2-1 because of that save, I think Twitter would be alight with Leno slander, but it's not. And I think we can probably just let that one slide as a bad day at the office all round for most players, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, you know, we lost 3-1 to Liverpool. They're chasing the Premier League title. They're going to be playing Champions League football next year. It's disappointing to lose in the manner that we did, but I don't think we can walk away from this going, geez, that was terrible. we were sloppy. We didn't play badly. We were just sloppy. I think we created some good chances, but there's I wouldn't say there's positives to take from it, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this. And I'd be looking at this now and going, I'd kind of like to see Adama start a game before the end of the season. I'd kind of like to see Diop get a few starts over Tosin. If Tosin's head is completely out of the game and out the door, why are we still playing him? We're putting him in the shop window without actually putting something for free in the shop window. It doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot to take away from this, I think. Overall, just a really disappointing day of football. Let's take a quick look at the stats. Liverpool with 60% possession to Fulham's 40. Shots on goal, fairly similar. Fulham with 12, Liverpool with 14. 5 on target for Fulham, 7 on target for Liverpool. 425 passes for Fulham to Liverpool's 656. Just the one corner for Fulham to Liverpool's 4. 5 fouls by Fulham, 11 by Liverpool. Although I think if we had a different referee, it might be double that number. A quick look at the league table now. Fulham still sitting in 12th place, level on points with Bournemouth, who are 8 goals behind us in goal difference. So we've got a bit of a buffer there before the end of the season. We're just a 1 point behind Wolves, 2 points behind Brighton. So still very much within touching distance. I think Brighton play Arsenal Brighton play Man City, I think, is as one of their games in hand. So don't expect them to get much out of that. And Wolves have looked a little bit off the last few weeks. So there's still the potential for Fulham to push up to 10th place. It'll all really hinge, I'd say, on the games against Palace and Brentford coming up. Both sides now, almost certainly, you would have thought, safe from relegation. 10 points clear of the drop zone with 4 games to go. You'd expect to be clear. So maybe we do see those sides with their foot off the gas a little bit in the next couple of weeks. The game against Palace coming up on Saturday. It's a 3 p.m. kickoff again at Craven Cottage. Skibby, you going to be there for that one?
Absolutely. I'll be there. Hopefully I won't be sitting next to a Palace fan, but we'll see. But they just away fans just keep popping up in the Putney end a lot at the moment, so it's just being really frustrating. But I'll be there.
It's something I saw the Supporters Trust mentioned that
there's nothing they can do about it. I don't know why they did, but
home fans were all over the ground, which it's disappointing. But like you said, there's not a huge amount that's going to be done. And even if you try and do things about it, it always seems to happen. It's hard to actually enforce. Guys, before we finish up, just want to mention Fulham women's team, a 7-0 win against Enfield Town on the weekend. That win gives them the record points total in the Laser Waffle. 3 goals from Sophie Manzi, 2 goals from Georgia Heisman, a goal apiece for Maddie Parsonson and Belle Taylor Makepeace as well. Really good result as we come towards the end of the season. Just the 1 game left for the girls. So a really good season for them. Unfortunate not to get promotion, but there's a couple of very good sides in the division that have unfortunately kept us just at an arm's length from that single promotion spot. I think next season, a couple of signings definitely on the cards again, but been really good supporting the girls this season and looking forward to the final game of the year as well. Guys, I think we can probably sign it up there and chalk this one off as a sloppy game that hopefully we take something away from in learning a few lessons for next time. But it's good to have that group therapy session, really talk it out and I don't feel any better about it, but at least we've talked about it and I can tick that one off the list and move on to the next one. Skibby, thanks very much for joining us today, mate.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me, and hopefully Lukic and Tosin prove me wrong, but I can't see it on the horizon, but let's see.
Or sit on the bench, whatever works. Dad, thanks for joining tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Funny you should mention that. I don't feel better actually having discussed it, but there you go. Time heals all, no doubt.
Yeah, it really didn't feel like that. One thing I will say just before we finish up as well, for anyone who's made it this far in the podcast, just a bit of a shout out for Russ Goldman of Cottage Talk as well, who's wrapping up his podcast. Russ has been doing it, I think, for 14, maybe 11 or 14 years. I think
he said 11.
And
no, I think it was from 2011, wasn't it?
From 2011, yeah, it's 14 years.
Right.
I think he's been doing it. So he is the longest running Fulham podcast, and he's decided to hang up his boots at the end of the season. We're going to try and get Russ on before the end of the season for at least one podcast again, just to hear his dulcet tones and also give him our thanks as well before he signs off. So, just a little shout out for Russ and Cottage Talk before we finish up. Guys, thank you again. We'll be talking later in the week, previewing the Palace game. But until then, come on, you Whites.